Hey besties, welcome to Let's Talk SGBV. I am your host, Hassan Umaina, and with me is my friend, Wadi Ben-Hilki. Hi Wadi.
Hi Hassan and everyone.
Wadi is the founder of Range the Brand, and she is also the founder of Wadi Ben-Hilki Foundation. She's a social entrepreneur. Thank you, Wadi. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yes, Wadi gifted me this beautiful painting. I think, but before then, you've got Range the Brand, which is an affirmation company. You'll talk more about it. But just to say that whenever I feel low, like those Saturdays where you're grumpy and you're angry and you're like, what's happening in the world? I just get up, and I wear that shirt and I just walk about my day, because some of it has like, don't quit. Some of it has like, you go girl, and all of those things that kind of just pushes positivity into the world. And today you bought this wonderful gift of a painting that says don't quit. I'm going to have it in my office just so that when the grant applications are not coming
Don't quit.
I will look at it and I will not quit. But yeah, I think that would just it's just very befitting because of what we're talking about today. Our topic for today is the place of empathy in SGBV conversations. And I don't even know where to start, but I think with our conversations, there's no preamble, there's no middle, there's no conclusion. We just ramble on and on and on and on. Yeah. But I've been thinking around making space. I know that this is something you say all the time. Let's make space for people. Let's make space for people. And when we were thinking of topics for this month's episode, we thought of empathy. And I'm like, what is the person? What is your guy? So yeah, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on making space.
Okay, thank you. And like you said, we always just talk and hopefully piece it together. And for me, making space, it comes from different angles. And when I mean it, it's contextual. But in terms of, SGBV conversations, I would say that many times we seem to be hard on ourselves and by extension on other people. And, we just judge people's actions, whereas sometimes their intentions may be pure, but the actions do not reflect the intentions. And making space is just, giving grace to people, being kind to people, and also yourself, because there's something I always say: love your neighbor as yourself, not more than yourself or less than as yourself. So you should start from within. How do you carry yourself? How are you kind to yourself? And then how do you make space for other people? Do you listen to respond, or you listen to understand? So those are the some of the reasons why I always say make space, basically giving grace to people and being kind to them as well as yourself.
I think I like the emphasis on self. It just makes me think a lot about how much we like to run away from ourselves. And I don't think it's our fault. I think capitalism is to blame, the state of the world is to blame. Like, who has time to really sit down? To the extent that I feel like meditation now, taking a slow morning, going for walks, it's a huge luxury because people can't afford that. And I feel we're constantly running away from ourselves. And now that we're having this conversation and you're talking about self, I wanted to talk about Range the Brand in collaboration with Self. And I want to tell me about your philanthropic journey with Wadi Ben-Hilki Foundation, because you started it when you were at a very young age. Listen, when you were thinking about others, we were thinking about how our fathers promised us chocolate and he did not buy it. And you're like, Daddy, you said you buy us chocolate and you didn't buy. But you were thinking about others, and and I just want you to walk me through that journey, because I feel like you must come to a place of self-realization at that young age to have started. So yes.
Wow, that's putting me on the spot. But
Sorry.
It's fine. But it's important to reflect and sometimes introspect, because like you said, we just keep going. It never ends. And the realization that it never ends has helped me to know to take a break, because it really does not end.
Absolutely.
So whether you show up or not, life keeps going. So you have to pause. There's one phrase or one saying that has stuck with me over the years in my self-realization and healing journey, and that is, a cup that is half full is also half empty. So if you keep pouring out and nothing is poured back into you, you become empty, and that thing you want to do, that goal you want to achieve, you will not, because guess what, your body will shut down and there's nothing you can do. And the time that you think you do not want to waste, you will even spend more time getting yourself back. So that balance of refilling while you're pouring out is so important. That's the balance of others and self that I keep talking about. And for me, why I started at age 17, 18 was because growing up, we didn't have it all genuinely. There were tough times, tough, seasons. But one thing I knew that my parents always did was open up their all to other people. Sometimes we even said, like, at our detriment, if we must say, because they just poured, even when we lacked, our parents almost never said no. And sometimes now that we're older, my siblings and I always talk about how, why did they do this? Like, it's not like we didn't want them to, but like, these people actually poured so much. But guess what? Many times it speaks for us, right? We go to places and they're like, oh, and our surname is very unique. So they always know. They're like, oh yeah, this person's daughter, this person's son, and all. But for them, it wasn't even about what they were going to get out of it. Genuinely, that was them. And it rubbed off on us, It just rubbed off on us, being like smiling, just being open to people. But for me now, I know place of boundaries, I know place of self-care that they might not, maybe they didn't have the choice or opportunity. Most of us can relate to how most times we lived in families where like there were many people, aunties, uncles, whether you're related to them or not. But then the turning point for me was always going to orphanage homes and spending time with people. And sometimes our parents were searching our wardrobes. If they saw that you didn't wear an outfit that month, sorry, it's gone. You have to hide it, because they're like, that means you don't need it. And I'm like, but I'm keeping it for a special day. So they always
that special day is in the body of an orphan.
I know, like they always did. We will share. Sometimes we share like the little. So that also like played that role. But for me, my mom always said that I always just had that empathy for people. She would say sometimes when visitors visited and they were about to go, I would say, no, mom is cooking, wait. And she's like, do you know if I have planned for just, or take her money and go and give to people on the street, like things like that. And I can't even remember many of these things. But for the foundation, I think for me it was 2015 I started, but 2014 we know about, the abduction of Chibok girls, made the news. I'm from Adamawa State, so I think I had more, it hit me harder because Chibok, Borno, Adama, they're not far from each other. And I just sat down thinking, then I was in my third year or so in university or second year. And I'm like, it could have been anybody for real. Like this, most times we use statistics, but these are human beings with names, with families. We always say 10 million people. It sounds so big, but these are human beings, who deserve, to be treated with respect, dignity, to be protected. So for me, I'm like, these were girls who were my age range. I was 16 or 17 then, and they were not far from that. So it hit me and struck me that it could have been anybody, right? So that was what made me start. I had no idea what I was doing. Like, I just went registered with CAC when I turned 18 and just kept it moving. And because of that passion, people came on board. Some people supported because they bought into the vision. But for some, they're like, what's this 18-year-old girl doing? Let's just see. Let's support. And I'm thankful for the journey. There are many bad days, as you know.
Yeah.
There are days that are like, why did I even start this thing, There are days you want to help people, but you can't help everyone because you're limited. But I think for me, I just keep going because, my eyes are fixed on the prize and the fact that people need help. And for me, my wins are not the number of people, but quality as well. Because sometimes you want to help 2 million, but you can't. But even those 2 or 3 people, how are you helping them? And it's like a ripple effect. As you help them, hopefully they extend that and more people are helped. And how it's tied to range is that I went through a very dark phase, as you know. For a couple of years, I was like lost. I was dealing with traumas and all, which I was running away from, which is, to the point you made of we run away from ourselves. To one point that COVID happened, that is like everybody,
we all had to stop.
So,
we stopped, and it was you, yourself, and God.
I know. So everything I was running away from, everything shut down. There's nowhere to travel to. nowhere to go, you have to face it. How many movies do you want to watch? How many series?
At some point, it got tiring.
Exactly. So I'm like, okay, now let's face this thing that I have been running away from. And sometimes we run away unconsciously or subconsciously. We don't even know that's what we're doing until I realize things were triggering, something would trigger, and I'm like, okay, I have to deal with this. So range to me, at first the idea was not like a business. I started learning design and all because it was therapeutic, and all these affirmations that we put on the products now, I was writing to myself. A few days ago I was laughing. I'm like, I'm actually making a business out of healing, in the fact that every single design is me talking to myself, but now other people are relating. So for me, range is just like, it's a business, of course, or a social enterprise that just wants to spread love, positivity, and hope to a very broken world. Like, a lot of people are broken, but we just keep masking it, looking all fine and happy. But people are broken as a result of different things. Sometimes it's internal, battle. Sometimes it's external. Today there's a war, tomorrow there's inflation, next tomorrow. I was like, our generation has dealt with so many things within a short period of time, and people are depressed, people are anxious, people are suicidal for many reasons, health related, environmental, so many things. I'm like, okay, let's create a community of rangers, so people that believe in positivity, people that speak up. So our two things are advocacy and affirmations. And so for me, I'm like, when you wear those shirts and all, not just are you affirming yourself, but other people who get to see you and read it. So just spreading love in our own little ways and hopefully see where that goes. So it's really building community and reminding people of self-care. Self-care is not selfish. That's just what I would say.
Oh, but that's brilliant. That's very profound. And speaking about spreading love, I know the person that introduced me to your brand is our friend Sani, and he sent me that, and I'm always going to be grateful to him for that.
Absolutely.
And, talking about your foundation also, I'm very inspired by how you work with your beneficiaries. You're very in touch, you're very in. So like whenever you share like maybe a WAEC achievement or their milestone in school, I'm always so touched because it seems like you're sharing an achievement of a younger one. And many of these people were victims of the insurgency that happened in the Northeast. And look at how you've turned, their lives around basically by inserting yourself. And I love how it's not just from a distance. You don't, each and every person. It gives me Oprah, and I know she's like one of your role models as well, Oprah and her girls in South Africa. And it's just so lovely to see. And I know that must have been a lot, and also like taking space to heal yourself and all of that. But I want us to also just get back a little to the conversation on empathy and SGBV. Whenever we have conversations around SGBV, it's always like people say, oh, what if it's your sister? What if it's your uncle? No, not uncle, sorry. Forgive me. What if it's your sister? I was trying to be gender neutral, but no, it doesn't work in this conversation because that's not what they say. They say, what if it's your sister? What if it's your mother? What if it's your daughter? And I know that whenever we make those arguments, especially when someone has been raped or someone's been assaulted or someone's been harassed, or we want to push for better policies, we sit down on stage and we say profound sentences, or what seems like a profound sentence. But what if it's your daughter? And I know that we say all of that because we're trying to get these people to empathize. But I struggle with that. I struggle with that because why is it that she has to be she has to be yours, she has to be your something for you to know that this is wrong and this should not continue. Why does that have to be? Like, I am all for, let's empathize with people, but why do we push for that? Because to be honest, we've seen situations whereby fathers rape their daughters. We've seen situations. So does that even work? Like, I don't know. I'm just thinking around that, and I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts.
That's very, very valid. The point you have, and we have we're on the same page in that sense. And like you said, it's because many people want to, maybe make people feel more empathetic. So it's like, let's hit close to home, and so they will, relate more. But like you said, there are a lot of others. I don't have the stats, but there are many, cases that have been reported to us and other organizations of fathers and brothers and all of that raping, or assaulting their daughters, sisters. So now that it's theirs, so why did they do that? So that's back to what I was saying about also people's intention. Their intention is, let's say this to, strike a chord, but it doesn't always work. For me, I'm like, even if it's not your whatever, it is somebody else's daughter or sister. And even if she's not anybody's anything, she's a human being who deserves, dignity and respect and protection.
We kind of struggle with the idea that women are human beings too.
People do. People just make people objectify women. And because I work, at grassroots level with a lot of girls and women in IDP camps. Yesterday I was even there just on random visits. Sometimes I just go to spend time with them, and when I feel low, I go to draw strength from them, and they claim vice versa. And so these are girls and women who have experienced a lot of stuff. I remember during my master's dissertation, I did an empirical research, interviewed some of the girls, and all. And that was a very, very hard time because I didn't even know I would finish because the stories were deep, right? But I just wanted to hear really. And there was this girl who is orphaned. She lost her family, her parents as a result of insurgency. And then she found herself in the camp with her grandma, and they're living in one tent with her uncles. And her uncles were raping her. So she opened up during my dissertation, and of course they were like, you should not, as a researcher, you should not have close contact with. I told my research assistants to get the details of this, research participants, because for me, I did not want them to just think I just got information from them and left them. So after I submitted, my result came out and all, we went back to actually help, and she's out of the camp. So these uncles missed that they were doing this too. So many times I think I'm not in their minds, but many times it's about abuse of power. There was a conference I went to, and this girl, in trying to make a point, she was like, why are you raping people? They are, prostitutes on the street that will willingly give you. And I'm like, that is the whole point. It's about power. It's not about availability. That's you objectifying women again, right? Saying that, and who told you those ones are not raped? The whole point is choice. Yeah. So these people do it exactly, and consent. So these people do this because they want to take that power away from you, not because they are lacking of who to. It's about power. Many of them, I watch a lot of documentaries of real life stories, and the men will tell you that they just like to see the women helpless. Because South Africa, for example, has one of the highest femicide rates in the world. I think the highest in Africa. Many of the men that interviewed or during the court case, they will tell you, they just like to see women helpless. So sometimes they rape and then kill. So it's not about anything. So
I think at the end of the day, it's like there's just so much that is going on, especially with abuse, and at the core of it, the hatred of women. Because if you respect somebody, if you see someone as a person, there's just a whole lot that you cannot do to that person. And back to what I was saying about abuse, for instance, so many abusers you see them with friends, their male friends, it's all good. They get angry, they don't hit her. Then they come back home and they say, this woman talked to me rudely, and that's why I hit her. Your friends talk to you rudely all the time. You don't. Your male boss in the office talks to you rudely. You don't. Your female boss in the office talks to you rudely, and you don't hit her. And I think it just ties back what you're saying about power, because at the end of the day, it is power, and it is the abuse of power. And we see that happen in Bell Hooks wrote it beautifully. We see that happen in relationships where people think they have more power than the other. Sometimes even with women and children. And I think we must talk about power and empathy, and we must talk about how to manage that, because sometimes as human beings we find ourselves with so much power and we don't have the grace to be able to, and then we become bullies. How can we ensure that does not happen? And I think that's thoughts for all of us to ruminate about. But I want us to talk about survivors and the place of empathy, because so many times I find that people don't know what to do with themselves. A lot of times you see, even on social media, conversations happen where maybe someone shared an abuse story, it recounts an experience, and everybody answers in ways that I'm like, where's the empathy in it? Even when people are trying to be empathetic, it's always trying to guilt trip the survivor. And I know that you've had conversations as a researcher, you've had conversations as someone that has founded an organization. what can you advise, just so that people might be listening out there and like, I don't know what to say? What would you say to someone that is going through? And it might not just be sexual abuse. It could be domestic abuse. It could be even a situation whereby this woman that has said she's done with her husband or her boyfriend that has been assaulting and abusing and giving her black eye keeps on coming back to him. And you're the frustrated friend that you're like, can't you see this person is not good for you? What would you tell the people out there? What would you tell people that want to, talk about it from a place of empathy?
Thank you. That's really an important conversation. And like you said, abuse is very broad. The spectrum is broad. There's emotional abuse, which people may not talk about, which is equally important. I've been researching on mental health, and I realized that many times we focus on physical and sexual, which are incredibly important. However, we sometimes forget to talk about emotional, and that thing messes with people. And the sad part is, you can't see it, right? If somebody chops off my finger, hopefully not, you can see I'm bleeding. But if someone hurls very negative words time and time again at me, you can't see it, but it's really, really affecting me, my self-esteem. And by affecting my self-esteem, it affects how I even carry myself. And many times people don't know these things reflect in everyday life. You're now you who used to be very bold and confident, you're now very, timid. You're questioning yourself, imposter syndrome, so many, the intersectionality of these things are so many. And for me, because of the experience working with people, victims, survivors, and all the names, we call them, it's very broad, and I think it's very, very, context-based interventions. However, there are some that are like umbrellas and they overact. I would say, like, many times the reason people don't even come out to say this is the experience is exactly because of people's responses. You see online, someone will say, oh, I was abused 2 years ago. Why didn't you, come out since? This, that. That is exactly why they did it, because of your reaction now. Or what were you wearing? Why were you there? All those questions. How about girls who are like under 18, under 10 who were abused and all? What were they wearing? Where were they? So it's never about the person. And I always say something, many times it's linked to a lot of policies, laws, and regulations in countries that have, that are not conservative. Sometimes the cases of rape are not as high because their laws are in place. You go to the US, you go to the beach, you see the women. Why didn't you rape
them there? Yeah.
So it's not about what she wore, it's many times because you get away with it. Countries like India that they wear sari, they wear all these other places that they are well covered. They have high rates. Why? So many times it's cultural, it's structural and systemic, the discrimination, and because laws and policies do not favor women. Because UK and the rest, are they not as free as anything? I'm not saying they don't rape there, but the cases are not as high. So remove all that.
And have you seen, like, when you used to go out in London, do you used to see behind the bathroom doors where they would say, are you on a date? Is it not going well? Go to the bartender and ask for Angela. And I've always found that interesting, because in Nigeria they're like, you're on a date, okay.
Why did you even go? Why are you sharing your location? If you don't trust the man, why are you going with him?
So after you have eaten his money, you want to come and say what?
All those weird things. So many times it's removed. Like I always tell people and victims, because many times you start blaming myself. It's true, or why did I? No, it's not. It's totally not your fault, and it's hard to And secondly, many times people are in denial stage for long. There is no time frame for when you process things. No time frame. Somebody is used to processing things quickly, fine, but somebody else, it takes time.
And I feel like sometimes when it comes to trauma, you freeze.
Exactly, because you're like, what exactly? And your brain is trying to. There's this book by Oprah Winfrey and a doctor, What Happened to You.
Oh yeah.
I have the book.
I've listened to all the podcasts.
Exactly. And it's like sometimes you're like, what exactly? But your brain is trying to even protect you, especially at tender formative years. You don't process till later, or something happens and then brings back memory of how many years ago. So people process differently. Sometimes people stay in situations because power play one, and sometimes economic differences. Many women and girls, because of that, again, systemic and structural barriers that women, discrimination, they stay because they're like, oh, where do I go to? Where do I go to? I have children. Even those without children, where am I going to? And I think so many of these reasons.
It kind of ties to, because like I said, I was thinking of where to stop. because our conversations always don't have a place. It always gets to a high, you know, then we pick up the next time. But I was thinking about 3 words: toxic positivity, survivors, and victims. And I was thinking about it in regards context. So we always like to say, so when someone says a victim of sexual violence or victim of domestic violence, we always have someone in the room that is quick to say, no, call them survivor, which is great. But my mind has been thinking this morning as to, if someone dies in that situation, is that person a survivor too?
Very valid question, and absolutely not.
So at the end of the day, how can we ensure that as we are empowering people, people are also able to look at their situations quite honestly? Because if you're in that situation, I don't think you've survived it unless you have completely come out of it, you know, and you're on the other side of empowerment and you're back to yourself. And sometimes I feel for us to solve problems, we must get to a place of naming it. But I think with that is going to bring us to the end of the podcast. But before we go, we have a tradition, because it's a women's podcast. Ask for Support Initiative is a women's led organization, and we like to shine the torch on women that are doing incredible work. And we have a tradition where we ask our guests to mention just one woman that has made remarkable impact in their life, and they can just say like a word or 2 about the person, so that we can highlight them and have their picture displayed and all.
Oh, that's very beautiful. And the woman I'll choose, it may sound cliche, but it's my mother.
Oh.
And that's because, I mean, I have many women that I look up to that I might not have met, but I think sometimes we forget the sacrifices that the women that are within close proximity as us, they make, you know. And lately I've been thinking a lot about how my mother has played a huge role in
enabling. Do you want to tell us your mother's name?
Yes, her name is Hawa Ben Hirki.
Beautiful.
And she has made like huge sacrifices, supported me and my siblings to thrive, being behind the scenes. So I think it's high time I started telling the world about my mother and the beautiful sacrifices that she has made. And I hope she lives long to reap the fruit.
Amen. 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 And everyone backstage has said amen as well. Thank you so much for coming. And that's it for today. I remain your host, Hassan Omaina. Let us keep talking SGBV. You can reach out to us on all of our social media platforms, including our email address. Thank you and bye-bye.